Okay, so there we go. Okay, so I'm going to fix my command line here so that you can see clearly down at the bottom kind of what's happening. This is the demonstration file today. Your handout is 3 pages in total. The very beginning of that handout, okay, talks a little bit about how solid modeling is probably one of the best methods that we have to create more complex geometry. We don't really look at surface modeling anymore. If you look at the tabs in the top of your AutoCAD, we have our home tab where we find these solids. The mesh editing is here, but we don't really have controls to create meshes. And the reason for that is because the more and more advanced our software is getting, you know, whether it's AutoCAD or Revit or Rhino or 3D Studio, right, even SketchUp, the less and less surface and mesh modeling we are doing, right? So the difference between them is that when we look at a solid, such as this cube that we have, when it is being, uh-oh, my internet is unstable. Can you guys still hear me? We've been having troubles ever since we had the storm the other night. Can you still hear me? Yes? No? Okay, hang on one second. I'm going to okay, so what I was saying is that, and if I cut out again, please let me know. Ever since we had the storm, was it last night or the night before, the internet has not been as strong. And when, you know, just if I do cut out, please hit me in chat right away so that I stop. Okay. So with the meshes, we used to use them a lot because they save memory. And with the progress in the softwares and it becoming more and more powerful and the computers getting more powerful, you know, whether it's Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, AutoCAD, right? Any of these 3D programs, 3D Studio Max especially, we're using these meshes and these surface modeling techniques less and less. So when we go through the demonstration, a lot of the time when you are modeling your term project, you're actually creating a solid, right? So in our home tab, we've been looking at the modeling palette here, and all of these options in here are solids, right? It's the only option that they show now. They don't show the meshes anymore. They have a mesh editing palette here, but we don't actually have those tools here because we don't make as much use of them because we don't need to save that memory anymore. You know, on my work computer, even on this laptop, I have 16 gigabytes of RAM, right? This whole file, when we're working in 3D, has to fit in that 16 gigabytes of RAM, right, when we process it. So as you begin to create your model, you know, if you start looking at it in a shaded view where we're actually putting colors to the surfaces, you know, that memory will slowly be used by your file. And eventually, if you model enough things or you model something that's complex or too complex, you can actually crash the file, right? And then when you reopen it, the way that we save our memory is by using our 2D wireframe views. Because right now, this is not rendering. It's just showing us the edges, right? So if you get a really complex file and it's not running smoothly, you can always switch to your 2D wireframe, okay? And there is a 3D one as well, I believe, this one right here, this other wireframe, but it computes like crazy and I don't know why. So don't use the regular wireframe, always stick with the 2D one. It uses less memory and it's easier on your video card, right? Some people will notice that, as you get towards the end of the course, during class when you have things open, the computer will start to get quite hot, right? And that's just that video card inside processing things. Okay, but the more and more powerful the computers get, the easier it gets to kind of compute. Okay, so we're not having to worry about these meshes quite so much. If you look at the tabs at the top, we have our home tab, here's our solid tab, here's all the shapes that we've been working with so far in a different view. Polysolids are in here. I'll show you polysolids today. I'm going to use it for my mullions and some of the rails on the window, on the glazing. Okay, but all the other editing here that we have, all right, booleans, okay, union, subtract, intersect, those are all found right in here. Okay, BREP, this is a command which I don't even know if we need anymore. The last couple of releases, last year you could activate it. This year I don't know if it actually exists, but we'll find out when we get there, and maybe we can just ignore this. Okay, but today mainly we're going to look at our Boolean operations, okay, which help us join, subtract, and find the intersection between solids. Okay, and we're going to look at some of our solid editing here. Okay, after that, there are a couple of things, like we talked about extrude last week, how we can add height and volume to our shapes, but you can also extrude along a path the same way that we use sweep. Okay, so we'll look at some of the conditions for that, because I did get a couple emails about people having trouble, so we're going to review a few rules for when we're doing those extrusions. Okay, and this last one here is 3D align, and be warned about the 3D align. Personally, I've never really been able to get it to work really well. So sometimes when you have to align objects, you kind of have to work through things manually using the object manipulation. Okay. So for the mesh stuff, what is your question? Do you want to do it now, or do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to talk about it in lab time? Yes, you. Mesh extrude. How to add volume to your meshes.
I'm unmuting myself for a second.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, you don't have to stay silent.
Yeah, my question is also about extrude, not mesh. That's what I meant. Sorry.
Oh, extrude part. Yeah, so it can be a little bit tricky, right?
Yeah, with the model with the roof, I tried to do it like you did last week, but it didn't quite work. Like you did it smoothly when you were showing us on the project, the term project. I would like to see that again.
Sure, anytime, sure. And if there's problems, maybe you can share your screen with us and we can kind of run through kind of how you're approaching it as well.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. That's what we have lab for. Okay, so to get started, let's go back to our very beginning here. Okay, and we'll start looking at simple edits. Okay, I'm just going to open up my course out, or sorry, the lecture notes. Okay, so editing the grips and whatnot is not first, right? The first thing that we have on our handout is actually these Boolean operations, okay? But before we do that, I want to talk about grips a little bit, because we spent a little bit of time talking about grips in AutoCAD and what you can manipulate and how you can manipulate it. But, traditionally, especially when I took the course, we didn't talk a lot about it in 3D, okay? So when you select an object in 3D, right, you'll notice that it does have grips, okay? And the grips that it shows by default, okay, are the grips of the outline that was extruded, right? So at the bottom, there was a square, and then we added height to that square, okay? So we can change the shape of that square if we want to after the fact, right? This is a simple manipulation. You can also change how much height it has. So if I grab this grip, be careful, I don't want to grab see how it's making me grab the Z? I don't want that. But you know what? I'm just going to undo. That's going to be easier. Okay. If you grab this grip, you can snap to another object and match its height. So that can be really, really useful at times. Okay. But other than what we see here as far as these basic manipulations, if you hold down the Control key on your keyboard, you can also select individual edges. Right? So I can pick this edge and now I can shift it. Okay? So you can create custom shapes if you want to. And other than this edge, if you hover over top of an intersection point where the lines come together, you can actually grab a specific corner. Turn off my orthographic mode. So the solids themselves are actually quite flexible. Okay, you still have to be careful about what you're creating, but with a little bit of practice, you can manipulate these shapes and create all sorts of different situations. You can see my computer's having a little bit of trouble computing it there. Doesn't like what I'm doing. Okay, so grips can be really valuable. So say for instance, let's look at this in plan view. Okay, I'm going to set my UCS. Okay, here's my UCS. So the command is UCS, enter, and the option I want is face. So F for face. I'm going to pick this face. So you see how my UCS is aligning itself to this face. Okay. So if I wanted to, I could grab this grip and I can move it out a specific number. Okay, so for instance, if you ever had to in an exam or in your own projects, move this bottom edge out another foot, you could hold down Control, you could select that specific edge, and then type in that specific distance that you wanted to move. So I would pull it outwards, I would type in 12 and hit enter. And then I could hit escape and then do the next one, right? And I could go around the entire bottom, making sure I escape every time. And I could actually create a shape that has a little bit of a transition from the bottom to the top, right? Which is really common in concrete for foundation and columns and whatnot, right? To give it strength, okay? But being able to move these objects, right? You want to make sure that you have your X, Y, and Z aligned to that face properly, right? If we leave it aligned to the world, you can see that it's a little bit off, okay? So you have to always be a little bit careful about how you control that situation, okay? So the grips can be quite useful, okay? Next up, we have the corner. So you just hold, if you want to pull the corner, you just hold down Control and you have to click right on the corner. You have to be careful about it, right? So if you click on the edge, you pull the edge. If you click right on that intersection, you should see a red grip there, and you'll be able to pull the corner. Okay, did that work for you? Awesome. That's what we like to hear. Okay.
James, I have a quick question.
Sure.
When I enter UCS and pick the surface, my UC and the face, my UCS is like escaping on the screen and going to another solid on the union part. So it's not staying with the surface I picked
Oh,
is
how bizarre. How
mm,
bizarre, because if you do UCS and face, it should go to whichever face. Oh, it's, see, here, hang on one second. I'll show you. Okay.
yours is the
So
same.
right
You see how it's
right
right on union?
right
Yeah.
now, this is 0, 0,
Hmm.
right? If I go to 0, 0, it's underneath that union option. So when you do UCS and you select a face, when you pick your face, it will reset to this location until you accept it.
And how do
So
we accept it? Just enter?
once you accept it, it should go back to where you selected.
You just press enter, right?
Yeah, just enter again to accept it. You know,
Mm.
ultimately, as long as it's aligned properly, see, this one actually isn't. See how it's off? You have to be careful. Always have to be a little bit careful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Some,
um, you, you know, even if it doesn't go right to the right surface, you should always just kind of check and make sure it's aligned. And even in some cases, like this example I just did, even though it's on the right surface, it, you know, if we look at this kind of in an orthographic way, you can see that it's twisted. See that? Isn't that weird? So you might actually have to go back to your UCS, and we might actually, instead of using face, have to use a 3-point option. So the origin would be the center of this edge, the X would snap here, and the Y would snap to the midpoint here. And now when we look at it, now it's perfectly aligned. So just because we have the ability to use that face option quickly doesn't mean that it will always be perfect. You might have to try a different way. So being familiar with your UCS options, and you know, you should never be afraid to play with them. I've spent a lot of time learning different ways of using that UCS, both in 2D drawings when I draft for, you know, house plans and whatnot and building plans, but also in 3D especially. There's a lot of different ways you can manipulate the orientation of the X, Y, and Z axes. Okay, so just because you have that face option, it doesn't mean it will always be correct. Okay, that's funny. That's actually the first time that's happened. Usually it works okay.
it always happens to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, so you know, just have to keep an open mind, and if it doesn't work one way, we always have options to try a different way. Okay. So we'll look a little bit at grips today and kind of what we can do with that. I don't really know if there's a really strong application for it in the term projects, but we'll see if we can think of something, right? Ultimately, with the grips, it's nice to use to make overall adjustments when the architect or client makes, you know, small changes after you've modeled something, you know, makes editing a little bit quicker. Okay, so next up we have union, subtract, and intersect. All three of these operations are referred to as Boolean operations. A Boolean, it's kind of a funny word. Really what it refers to is any shape or object that is created by combining two or more solids. Okay, so these examples show two solids each, but really that's a minimum number. You could be making these Booleans out of many, many different um, shapes and solids. Okay, so union, okay, sometimes we want objects to function as one, right? Right now, these are two different objects. If you haven't noticed yet, you'll see me tonight clicking on an object. And when you click on an object, a gizmo appears. So this temporary control here, this is referred to as a gizmo. And what it allows you to do is if you click on one of the axes, okay, our X, Y, and Z, if we click on one, we can actually move this shape really quickly, right? If you go on the squares in between them, it will actually do a combination on my orthographic one, right? It'll do a combination of X and Z or X and Y. So you can kind of use these gizmos to make quick little adjustments in your 3D scenes, right? And you know, you can get away with a lot of those adjustments because you know, ultimately, when a lot of the time when we're doing 3D for the point of visualization, we're not going to go back and measure everything. We're creating an image. We're creating that image based on, you know, the rule of thirds or the golden ratio or whatever we're trying to accomplish for our clients, right? They're not going to care whether the ceiling is at 9 feet or 9'6" or 8'8", right? Sometimes we need to manipulate things slightly to create a better scene and a better environment. Okay, so when we use these Boolean commands, it's really important that you read the command line. AutoCAD will give you some very specific instructions, okay, on what it wants you to do to accomplish these tasks, right, to accomplish these commands. And if you don't read the command line, you know, it takes a little bit of practice, but you can do them quite quickly. But if you don't read the command line, you can run into some problems. Okay, so just be patient early on and take your time with what we're trying to accomplish here. So union is the combination of objects. So it takes two separate objects, right? We have two objects right now. Okay, so we click on the union option. The alias is UN. No, it's not. Oh, there is no alias anymore. You have to use the full one. Darn. I used to have it set up on my other computer. Maybe that's good because then we have the same situation, all of us, right? I really wish those notifications wouldn't pop up. Really annoying. Okay. So we start the union command. It's going to ask us to pick our objects. Okay, we pick one object, we pick the next. And when you hit enter, AutoCAD will reformat this and actually give edges where they belong. So before, right, we had no edges. They're just intersecting. They're running into each other. But once we use that union command, AutoCAD will actually format this properly, which is really useful because now we can actually hold down control and we can click and we can manipulate this shape, right? So we can start to do more and more complex things with those grips when we start to create more and more complex union and booleans and whatnot. Okay. Subtract, okay, it looks at two shapes. You have to pick which one you want to subtract, okay, and basically what it does is it removes the part where they intersect. Okay, so if we start subtract, it's going to ask us to select our object. So if you read the command line up top here, it asks us to pick the objects that we are subtracting from. So you're picking the part that will stay. Okay, I want this big block to stay, so I will pick this. When I'm finished, I can hit enter to go to the next step. And now it's going to ask me to pick the solid surfaces and regions to subtract. So what part do I want to remove? Okay, I want to remove this small piece. Okay, when I hit select that object and hit enter, AutoCAD is going to do a quick operation and it's going to subtract that smaller block from the larger one. So for the Barcelona Pavilion in particular today, this is how we will create the ponds that it has, right? The reflection pools. We will create some template shapes and then we will subtract them from our podium. You could also use this to punch holes into a wall, right? For windows and doors. So if we go up top a little bit, okay, let's look at this example for subtract. Okay, we could create a wall, okay, a little bit skewed. Actually, we'll go this way. Okay, we could create a wall. I could use D for dimensions. So we'll say the width of the wall is 6 units and the length is 10 feet. Okay, so there's my 6 by 10 wall as a polyline. I can extrude it 8 feet, right, which is kind of our typical room height right now. Sure, people in the background. No words. Actually, yeah, mute it. Done. Is that better?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Now I'm going to mute you. Haha. Okay. So in this wall, right, if we know that we have a window 3 feet from the corner, okay, and the window is 4 feet long, the shape that I would use, okay, we're going to go over 36 units, and I'm going to create a block out, right? And the shape's going to exaggerate. I'll move it up on my z-axis to the proper height. Now keep in mind, I'm just making this up, right? We'll extrude this, let's say, we'll pretend it's this height. And in order to subtract it, I need to make sure that it is intersecting through the entire surface, right? But once I have this set up, I can use that subtract command. I pick the object I want to keep, hit enter. I pick the object I want to remove, and then we have a window, right? So once you get the hang of these Boolean operations, you can use them quite quickly to create all sorts of different situations with doors and windows and other features that kind of break through specific solids. Okay. So we have subtract, okay. Intersect. Okay. Intersect looks at two different solids and it finds what they have in common. So it keeps the overlapping part. So if I start intersect, pick one object, pick the next, and when I hit enter, it will keep that common piece. Okay. So a lot of the time when we're doing mechanical work, right, this is kind of what we would use to create specific shapes. Okay. Right, we'll do something quickly here. Okay, so I have the plan view. Okay, let's look at this for a second. Okay, so in a file, a lot of the time when there's tons and tons of different stuff, if I start rotating around, you know, other objects can get in the way and it gets really busy. So when I want to work on one piece specifically, if you right click, sorry, I clicked on here. If you right click, you can actually use this isolate option, right? So I'm going to isolate this object. And now it's the only thing that exists in model space. Once I'm finished working on this object, I will go back to isolate and end the object isolation. So in 3D, being able to isolate specific parts of your model sometime can make it a little bit easier to work on. All right, so I'm just going to isolate this for 1 second. Okay, let's look at this in the plan. So let's pretend this is the plan view of our shape. Okay. Our outside elevation looks like something like this. I'm just making something up. And this would be provided to you by your clients. Fancy E. I didn't want to make an F. No one likes Fs. Okay. So if I got this from a client, right, we have our base plan of what it looks like from the top view. We have our side plan. Basically, if I wanted to, I would I went the wrong way. I gotta go with this way. Okay, I would create both of these as 3D solids. Okay, so I'm gonna move this using my object snaps so that they are on top of each other. And if I extrude one, and then I extrude the other, I can use intersect. This is too easy though. Hang on, this one's too simple. Let's do this instead. This is what happens when you think of examples on the fly. Yeah, I want to convert this to an arc. Okay, now when I extrude this, you get a more complex shape, which is what I want. Right, so alone, neither one of them kind of fits the profile that the client might want. But when we use intersect, right, we can use any combination of shapes to get very specific patterns out of it. So a lot of the time when you look at designing gears, you look at designing mechanical equipment or equipment for doors or something structural for architecture, you have to use a combination of different objects in order to get what you really need out of the whole thing. So it's always kind of interesting, and it's hard to come up with examples, but if you look through the internet, you can probably find a few combinations of what we might need, you know, to put this together using your Boolean operations. And there's a couple of examples as we go through the term project as well. Right, when you start to put together door hardware and window hardware and other things that you will see. Okay, okay, so BREP, BREP. So basically, this is Boolean retention, something something. I don't remember, to be honest. I haven't had to use it too much since a couple of years ago because the machines just keep getting better. But basically, what it does is if you get an older model or a model from other softwares like SketchUp, BREP will actually help you clean things up a little bit. It gets rid of model history. So let's see if this works. Yeah, so it doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. No, it does. It says it does. Yeah, you know what? I don't think we need to worry about BREP. So we can just go like this. We just put an X through it. Okay. I wasn't sure, to be honest, whether it would be in this version or not. But you know, if you use an older version of AutoCAD, basically it just helps you clean things up. Okay. Helps you save memory. Okay. So for the solid editing portion, I'm going to switch over to my solid tab. Okay, here's our solid editing tools that we have here. We'll quickly look through them. The most important ones that we have to use are slice and probably the live section. Okay, you can take a look at some of these other options if you want to, but for today, I just wanted to show you the, we're going to look at shell as well, but I just want to show you slice and live section. Okay, so when you slice an object, you're basically, it's like taking an X-Acto knife or a blade and cutting it in half like it's a block of butter. Okay, so if I use slice, okay, the alias is SL. It also exists up in the top left corner of the solid editing palette. It will ask you to pick the object that you want to cut. Okay, so I'll pick this big block, and then it asks you to specify a start point and a end point. Okay, so you have to imagine that we are looking at this from the top. The question I get a lot is, how do I switch to the top quickly? So you can go to your view cube and click on top, right? Click on top, it will take you to the top. A lot of the time I do turn this view cube off. I don't particularly like it, so I'll go boop. It helps if you make the boop noise, right? But I like to see screen, and having that view cube just takes up space, right? So I don't like the view cube. A lot of the time when I'm switching to a specific view or I'm switching to the top quickly, I'm using a command called plan, P-L-A-N. So if you type in plan and hit enter twice, once, twice, it will reset your view to the UCS orientation, right? And because I always reset my UCS to world, using plan very quickly puts me into a top view. Okay. I like that. Okay. So when you slice something, right, you pick your object, and then you're picking 2 points, right? So I'm specifying how I want to slice through this object, what angle I want to slice through it at. So sometimes when you're slicing something, it helps if you can go to an orthographic view. Okay, so I pick my first point, I'm going to go straight across here and pick my second point, and it will ask me, pick a point on the desired side. So I went straight across, I can pick the bottom or the top, or if I hit enter, I can keep both sides, right? A lot of the time, just to be safe, I keep both, and then I will manually delete what I don't want. So if I hit enter, it will keep both. And you can see that I've sliced straight through here, and we actually have 2 different objects now. So if I wanted to, right, I could move this object, right, and we can separate them. So we can use slice to do all sorts of things. So if I create the, right, so if I create a roof plan, okay. Yeah, I forgot to reset my UCS. There we go. Okay. So if I have a simple roof, right, we're going to go like this. Okay, 45 degrees there. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing this quickly. Oh, trim doesn't work the same anymore. Isn't that funny? You can't select all anymore. Interesting. Okay. So in plan view, what the architect provided me, I have this simple roof plan, right? You'll know the slope, so we'll know the specific height to model it to. And the way that we would model this is we would trace out each of these shapes as a polyline. Okay, there's my polyline 1. I'm going to be lazy and just do this twice, because technically we could just flip them to the other side. Okay, there's my second polyline. I will extrude them. Go to my 2D library. There's one, there's the other. I'll extrude them. We'll just say 6 feet. We're just making this up, right? So there's the extrusions. So in their most basic form, okay, they kind of look like so. But in order to finish this roof and give it pitch, you would have to use that slice command. So if you use slice, pick one object first. Instead of just using 2 points, we'll use 3, right? So here's our 3-point slice. So we're going to pick the bottom plane. And then we want it to slice in a direction up to the top of the pitch. And when we delete that last part, we get that roof with slope. Okay, if we do this next one, okay, pick those bottom points. And then we're going to go up to here, to the top of the slope. And that's how you create residential roofs, right? Now, if we wanted to, we can mirror from one corner to the other. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, I would have to rotate it. Sorry, I'm having a moment. But that's not even what I want either. I want to do copy and do it at 180 there. Okay. So it's not actually too bad to start modeling these things. And then if we use union, we can connect them all into one solid. And then if the architect wants to increase the pitch, I can grab this edge and I can pull it up or down. Right? So with a little bit of practice, we can start to get creative with how we start putting these things all together. Okay. So slice can be really, really powerful. There's some opportunities to use it on your term projects, but most of it, comes from hacking together different solids and cutting away what you don't need or what you don't want anymore. Right. So slice can be quite useful. Okay. For these shapes, I'm actually going to move them back together and join them. We'll get rid of that slice line. And then I want to show you the last one here, which is live section. Okay, after we do live section, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at these extrusion commands. And I'm nervous about 3D align, but we'll have a stab at it. Okay, but I want to look at live section, and then when we come back, we'll look at these extrusion ones, the align, and then what we can do with our term project today. Okay, so with live section, right, it's always more interesting to have something that you can kind of section through. Okay, so in our case, what I'm actually going to do is right now, this is one big solid block, right? It's one volume. What you can do is you can actually add a little bit of a shell to it. So it will put a hollow on the inside. So if we select this object and hit shell, okay, or sorry, it kicks us out. We're gonna click shell. We're gonna click our object. Remove faces. No, we don't want to remove faces. I'm just gonna hit enter. And then we're gonna enter the shell offset distance. So we could give this a 3-unit shell. Okay. And when we hit enter, we will have that shell. Okay. So you won't be able to see it, but if we look at the 2D frame, we can actually see that on the inside now, we've actually created a hollow. Okay. And if you're not doing this right now, that's okay. You won't have to use live section. I just kind of want to show you how it will work. Okay. So when you set up your live section, there's a whole palette dedicated to it. Basically, what you're doing is you're creating a section plane, and then you have other tools which will allow you to work with it. So section plane, same as slice. We're picking 2 different points to create a line. If the graphic is on. So I'm going to go through here. When I click the second point, it will create this section for me. All right, so you can actually model an entire building in 3D, and then you can take sections through it if you want to. Right, if you click that plane, you can go up or down. Right? No, it doesn't want to work right now. Awesome. Okay, you can slice it. You can do a plane. You can set up boundaries. volume, all different ways, all different sorts of ways that we can do this. You can flip it from one side to the other by clicking on this arrow here. And if you want to, you can even grab it and you can move it to a new location to take a different section. So the live section, especially if you're working in an office and people want to start to look at how your slabs stack up or what the structural is looking like in different locations, this can be really useful. However, you have to keep in mind that this is purely dependent on you modeling things correctly, okay? If you don't model your building 100% accurate, then providing sections, you have to be really careful about it, okay? So always be a little bit careful about things, okay? So that's your live section. You can escape off of it. If you click on it and right click, you can activate it or deactivate it. So sometimes you want it active and sometimes you don't, right? You can still keep it there, but you don't always have to have it active, okay? So I'm gonna pause recording. We'll take a break for a few minutes. And then when we come back, we will take a look at extruding items along paths and some of the rules for how we can make that work a little bit better. And then we will talk a little bit about what we can do with some of these Boolean operations and some of the other solid editing to continue on with our projects and whatnot. Okay, so I'm gonna mute myself and pause, and then we'll be back in about 10 minutes.
James?
Okay, so last thing. Okay, I was trying to get the 3D align to work. You can find it. Where did I put it? I was just using the alias. I don't actually know where the button is, to be honest. Okay, anyways, we'll talk about that in a second. Extrude along path. So you have to be careful about how you extrude objects along paths, because you don't always get the results that you want. But one thing to think about is that, sometimes we're not looking for things to be absolutely perfect. We're just looking for an object in a scene to represent an item, right? It doesn't always have to be perfect. It's 3D, or you can leave it, and at times we will add specific things and Photoshop it later, right? We'll just paint them in or draw them in. You have to kind of pick and choose your battles at times, okay? So with extrude on path, when you extrude this object, okay, we use the extrude command. You can extrude it straight up or down using your mouse, or inputting a specific height, or at the bottom here, you can play with some of these other options. Expression, taper, like I don't really use these very often. Even direction, usually I use cursor to point which way I want to extrude. But path here can be valuable. Okay, so if I choose path, and then I pick this polyline as the path, AutoCAD will fail, right? It's not going to work. So right now, the note that it gives me is that the path curve is coplanar or tangent to the plane of the profile curve. What that means is that they're not aligned to each other. Okay, they're not aligned to each other. So what we would have to do is either we have to rotate this shape so that it is perpendicular or aligned to this polyline, or we have to take the polyline and do the opposite. For this purpose, the polyline, if we've drawn it on architectural plans, is probably the right orientation. So you would need to take this shape and orientate it, okay? So what I would recommend to you is that you move it to the path, to one end or the other. Okay, so I'm going to move this to my path. Okay, and then I'm going to use this 3D rotate option. Okay, my base point, I'm going to go halfway in between both of these. I'm going to rotate this way. Angle starting point. I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go forward. Okay, so I've rotated it. I'm just following the instructions there. So it has moved off a little bit, so I might have to reposition it again. Okay, where you position the profile that you want to extrude, it does make a difference, because if I have it up top here, when I extrude it, okay, P for path, it's going to keep that orientation. Okay, if I needed it to be centered, then I need to move this downwards. So I'm going to use I'm going to track and find the center point here off of the different points, move it down to the center. Now when I extrude it, using my path, it will be centered. Okay, so you have to be careful about how you orientate your objects and how you position them once they're in the proper orientation. Okay, because and in some cases, such as this shape here, orientating it is going to be tough, right? You would have to almost eyeball it, to be honest, right? So if I was to extrude it right now, actually I haven't checked to see if this will work. It should work. Okay, we can extrude it, but you can see that it's skewed. So we don't get quite what we want. So you just always have to be careful to try and rotate these. And in some cases, because it's 3D, right? Because we're doing this for architectural visualization, sometimes you just have to make your best guesstimate, right? So we can rotate this. Here's my base point. I want to rotate on this axis. Let's start here. Am I rotating it properly? Yeah, it's just, oh, you know what? I'm going to rotate a little bit this way. I can kind of eyeball it on this line here. And then I'm going to just leave it like that. So when I extrude this now using path, right, it has a much fuller shape. It's not so squished anymore. You just always have to be a little bit careful about how you extrude things. Okay. Now, 3D align. You can play with this if you want to. If you can't get it to work, then there's other ways around it. You can just use rotate and move, and you can do things manually as well. But basically, what it does, okay, 3D align. See, it shows the symbol here. It looks like this. So it's actually this one right here. Sorry, I couldn't find it before. There's 3D align. So in your modify palette, it's the option right above erase. 3D align. Okay. So what it allows you to do is we can pick our object. We're going to specify the base point. So I'm going to use this point, second point, third point. So basically I'm specifying this face, and then I can pick where I want this to be orientated. That's not what I expected. But to be honest, if I was going to do this manually, you could try it again and try different points. But if I wanted this, basically what I wanted was for this face to be flat on here. You know, if I was doing this personally, right, specify my base point, I would pick my base point, I would rotate this, and then I would move it. That's how I would align things, and that's how I was always taught to align things. Sorry, I'm going to turn off this. I don't want the notifications. Don't show me this again. So annoying. Okay. So 3D align can be frustrating. I personally have troubles with it. So there are other ways to approach it, right? You don't always have to use it if you don't want to. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of things here, and then we'll get into lab time because there's a lot of new stuff that we've done here tonight. Okay. I want my Barcelona project. Oh, I didn't save anything? You gotta be kidding. No way. Oh, it crashed. Sorry. Last week when we finished the class and I left, I lost everything because it crashed. Isn't that awesome? That's okay. I won't remodel it for you, but we'll talk about a few things. So what I would like to see, okay, here's our whiteboard. Okay, I would like to see what you've done so far. Okay, doesn't have to be finished, doesn't have to be awesome. It just has to be some progress. Okay, so what I would like you to email to me today, okay, or tomorrow if you need a little bit of time to work on it, right? Capitals, email James your term project progress, right? I want to review it and I will give you your marks. Okay, as long as you've done some work and as long as you've picked one of the projects, you will get your 10 out of 10 for your assignment 1 mark, right? I just want to use this as a checkpoint to see what you've been doing so far and provide you a little bit of feedback and help if you need it. So in order to email this to me, you can look at the course outline, or you can use this. Okay, that's my email, jinslee@bcit.ca. Okay, the technically, right, you're just supposed to be getting your term project today or next week. I can't remember what the official course outline says, but the idea right now is that we would use some of the Boolean operations and we would go and the slice command, a couple other things that we could practice with, and we would go and we would apply those to the project and keep moving forward. Okay, I do want to show you those Boolean operations. So I'll give you 2 minutes to get my email down. I'll put it in the chat as well, in case you want to copy and paste. Okay, and then actually I am going to have to model the podium once more, but that's okay. And a couple of things we can talk about there. Okay. So give you 1 more minute for this, and then I'm going to switch back to AutoCAD, and we'll just be about 10-15 more minutes, and you can go if you want to. Okay. Okay, let's get going here. Okay, so one thing I kind of assumed, but maybe I should not have, is that when you start to put together your project, you're going to have to use a little bit of layer management. Okay. Something that's pretty typical with most CAD drawings but you know, when you get into 3D, you don't have to be quite so specific anymore, right? You can be a little bit more creative with your naming. Okay, so when I start to create my layers, okay, I'm not going to necessarily do them by material because that might be a little bit too generic, right? So I would create a couple here, and I'm going to always, out of habit, I always put a prefix of 3D on them so that I separate all my 3D elements from other stuff. So if you haven't done this, you can do it at any time, right? You just have to go back and reapply layers to objects. Right? There's my podium, 3D podium. Okay, and then we'll do another one today. We'll do 3D walls. And those are going to be my two layers. Color for my podium, it's going to be beige, right? Because we're not plotting this, it's just colors. The wall color will be blue. Actually, my water is going to be blue. Oh, I should do it blue. I'm going to do water too. 3D water. And that's going to be a beautiful blue color. Awesome. I can't wait. Super excited. Okay. So same thing as last week. Like I said, my file crashed, unfortunately. So you can tell that I didn't save it at all because I lost everything, which is not good because now I have to do it again. So if you don't like to redo your work, saving consistently and often is a good idea. Okay. I extrude it down. And I'm doing it really far down because I'm going to have a ground plane here. So it's going to actually cover up the bottom. So it doesn't matter whether it goes too far down or not. Okay. I also had my roof in here. I have two different roofs here. The distance is 12. So extrude, we'll pick 1, 2, we'll extrude them up to 12. And then the height to move them up is 130. So we'll go up 130. There, back to where I was. Beautiful. Except, oh, I did do it on the right layer. So why doesn't it look nicely? Hang on one second here. Conceptual, there. Conceptual shows the colors a little bit brighter sometimes. But realistic. Realistic does it kind of too. It's a little bit more muted. Okay. So the thing I want to do is I want to do these pools. Okay, so you can approach it in lots of different ways. My way might be a little bit heavy-handed, right? But basically, I'm going to punch a hole through the entire podium, right? So if I go with my rectangle from one corner to the other, and do this side as well. We'll do it all at the same time. Doesn't look right. We'll go from there to here. Okay. I can select. See, sometimes depending on how your view is, it won't let you pick those polylines. If I switch back to 2D, it will now. Weird, eh? Okay. I'm going to go down even further, right? So if you look at this, if you look at this in conceptual, like I've really over exaggerated how far down this subtraction object is, right? That's okay, because to always be safe, I would never leave these sitting right on the surface. See how they're right on the surface, they're flat? I would, it's dangerous to do that. You can create some really messy geometry. So I always grab them and go a little bit up so that I make sure that this subtraction object penetrates all the way through the solid. Now, when I subtract, I can pick my podium, I can pick the two objects to subtract, and I'll punch right through. Okay? You can see I've punched through on the bottom. Okay, this layer is getting in my way, this hatching, so I'm actually going to turn it off. There. Let me turn this off too for now. Okay, so now we can see that. So how deep is this pool? I don't really know, right? I don't know yet. I know there has to be some sort of a base to it. Okay, so we can kind of, if I want to, I can put a rectangle in here. 1, 2. Okay, same thing as before. I won't be able to extrude these, so I have to switch to my 2D wireframe view. I won't be able to select them unless I'm in this view. And I can just guess on this. Right? Because all I'm going to do is pick these objects now and move them down a specific amount to create the depth to that pool. So if you look online, it's not very deep. It might be 18 inches or 2 feet at the most. All right, so I'm going to go 18 units down. Okay, and now we have our pools added. So is this the only way to do it? No, there's other ways that you could do this as well. There's not really a right or a wrong. It's up to you to kind of look at some photos online, find a little bit of reference, and try to recreate that as you see fit. Okay. You know, using the Boolean operations that we've looked at today, practicing a few of those things from the demonstration file, you can go and you can start to add more things here now, right? You can start to look at the glazing, you can start to look at these columns, you can start to look at adding details like the reflection pools and the bench, and there's even a window over on this side that needs to get punched. So you'll have to find a little bit of reference for these windows, right? And I don't have exact measurements for them, so you're making your best effort at it. And that's all we really ask, right? We just want you to make your best effort. There's not a right or a wrong in a lot of these cases. Okay? So one last thing to show you. If you do start to look online and find views that you enjoy, views that you want to see, okay, you can start to put some cameras down as well if you want to. Okay, it's nice to see our projects with a little bit of perspective. Okay. If you go to the Home tab, okay, start from the Home tab. If you count over 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs to visualize, you have the ability from this visualization tab to do things like set up sun and sky, to set up materials, and to set up your cameras, right? Sun and sky and materials we will cover in other weeks. But it's nice if you want to be able to create some cameras. So if I wanted to, I could click on camera and I would just follow the instructions. Basically, it wants to know where you're standing and where you're looking. So specify the camera location. I'm going to stand in the water right here in the corner. I'm going to look this way. Okay. After that, I just have to go through my different options here. What's the height of the camera? Okay, my eye height is 5'7", maybe 5'6", I don't know. Everyone's is a little bit different, but 5'6" is kind of average. Okay, the lens, if you know a little bit about photography, you can choose what type of lens you want. Architectural photography, I used 24mm a lot, and I've used 24. I don't need to do any clipping or anything else, so after that, I'm just going to enter and exit. Now, I have a camera. So if I select it, I can see this camera view up top here. Okay? So if I wanted to, I can grab this target and I can actually start to navigate around and choose what I want to see. And I can start to set things up for when I render this. Okay, so if you want to play with your cameras, you can play with your cameras. Okay? And you can set a few up. If you have troubles, they do have properties, so you can go back through the properties and reset some of these items, right? I want the target height to be the same as the camera height, right? And you can try things out to kind of see how things go, okay? Next week, we will talk about the cameras a little bit more if you want to. Well, not whether you want to, but we will talk about cameras a little bit more. And if you want to, you can start adding in walls and glazing and other elements. And then when you set up your cameras, you can start to decide where you want to add additional details and whatnot. And another thing you can do as well is if you have a camera selected, you can right click and set the camera view. So we can actually go to this view. Right? And now we're in this view in 3D. Okay. If you want to get out of this view, because it can be a little bit problematic to work and model in this view, you go up to your view and you just reset it back to your top or bottom, or however you want to do it. If you have a little bit of odd perspective to it, see how it has perspective and it's hard to control? You have to go back to your view and turn off perspective, put it back to parallel. Now we have proper AutoCAD again. Okay, so if you have troubles with the cameras, don't forget to reset your view to top and turn off the perspective. Okay. Kind of disappointed that I lost my progress, so I had to redo it. But I'm going to sit here during lab. I'll sit with you if you're working on it, and we will continue to kind of poke away at this a little bit.